Ninjago's a show that's been around long enough to see its teen years, with its first episodes airing in 2011. And after several years, the show is bound to change in a lot of ways over time. And of course, with so much content presented to fans, everyone is bound to have very different opinions, which is nothing more than expected. But something I've seen a lot from Ninjago's audience, especially the older portion, is that Ninjago's gotten worse over time. Now, of course, the people who were kids when Ninjago's earlier seasons were airing are now adults, or likely close to being adults. And with a series that's run for 13 years, there are obviously going to be people who form opinions based on nostalgia, and that's perfectly fine. And then you have people who were introduced to the show through the Wild Brain era and Dragon's Rising, and they're likely to think that the show probably looks and is better than it used to be, and that's fine as well. But what I really want to address is the people who think that Ninjago is bad now. There's a difference between thinking that something used to be better than it is and thinking that something just sucks. I don't have a problem with anyone's opinion on the show or any of the seasons in particular, because that's for them to decide. But I personally think that there's something to enjoy about every Ninjago season. Now, when I say older and newer seasons of Ninjago, I'm going to divide this specifically into two parts so that it's more clear what I'm talking about. Anything in Masters of Spinjitzu is what I would consider earlier Ninjago. Anything that came after March of the Oni would be newer Ninjago, at least in terms of what I'm talking about here. I hold the older ones in very high regard, because that's what I grew up with. But I do think it's worth defending the later ones, because they're still pretty good. One thing that I do want to mention beforehand, though, is that I see a lot of criticism for the later seasons of Ninjago coming from fans that haven't watched it. And that's understandable, given that they probably watched the show when they were younger, but haven't watched it in a long time. And now seeing all of these changes, it doesn't feel like the show that they grew up with. And that's fair, because it's not the show that they grew up with. Again, Ninjago has gone on for several years. It's not the same as it was. And I think that's much more preferable to if the show just stayed the same. I don't think a series with nearly 20 seasons where nothing changes would even be worth watching. So I think that the fact that Ninjago isn't the same as when people were younger should be viewed as a positive thing. I don't think something being different than when it was before is a good reason to think that it's worse. And when it comes to the newer seasons, there have been ones that most of the audience would consider to be really great. Seasons like Master of the Mountain and Seabound are for the most part really well received. But then again, there are seasons that fans really didn't like Season 11, the Fire chapter in particular, and Crystallized. And then some people might not like Dragon's Rising because of the story that it's telling. Dragon's Rising introduced probably the most change we've seen in the cast and the plot, which for some people, it's just not for them. But I think it is important to remember that when you compare older Ninjago to newer Ninjago, you're not comparing something that was perfect to something that isn't. A lot of people who might not have seen the earlier seasons in a long time probably look back on them without seeing the flaws, which is a good thing. You want people to remember the best parts of the show. But it is worth considering that even way older Ninjago seasons had concepts and storylines that fans really didn't like. The most notable of these is the love triangle between Jay, Cole, and Nia, and I think that that's a part of the show that pretty much everyone has the same opinion on. I don't think I've ever come across anyone who liked it. And then there were the redesigns from Season 7 to Season 8 that a lot of people had very split opinions about. And there are also several instances of inconsistencies when it comes to the plot in older seasons, which granted recent ones have that issue as well, which is something we saw especially in Crystallized. But I don't bring these up to rag on the old seasons. As I said before, I hold them in very high regard, but I don't think that the show has gotten worse. It continues to introduce a lot of new stories and ideas, and new and interesting characters as well, and they also further develop the characters that we already know and love. So I think the contrast between new and old when it comes to Ninjago serves to highlight the better parts of every season. In general, Ninjago has done a really good job of continually introducing us to new stories that are interesting in their own ways. And even though every season has its cons, I feel like more often than not they're outweighed by the pros. So I really don't think that Ninjago has gotten worse, nor do I think that Ninjago was worse before. To me, Ninjago has been a consistently great series, and of course it's kept my interest for a long, long time. And among Ninjago's audience, I don't think it's worth arguing over opinions, because when it comes down to it, what everyone has in common is that they at least like something about Ninjago. Oftentimes the reason people are so critical about things is because they want the series to do well. They want it to be good, or they want it to be better. I don't think it's worth just being purely hateful towards newer seasons or older seasons. At the end of the day, everyone's going to have their own opinions on everything. In my opinion, every Ninjago season has something great to offer. But obviously I can't speak objectively on the matter, since when it comes to media that's out there purely to tell a story, people's viewpoints on it are going to be very different because they are purely based in each person's perception. So there's really no point in trying to change people's mind about what they like and what they don't like. If something is enjoyable to you, then just enjoy it. But that is all for now.